And welcome back to my channel. Unless you're new here, then it's just welcome. Come on in. We are going to now continue my foray into the Omen franchise with Omen III, the final conflict. Yes, right there. Now, Omen III, the final conflict, was released in 1981. Was directed by Graham Baker, written by Andrew Birkin, and of course, derivative from David Seltzer. It stars Sam Neill, Rossano Brazzi, Don Gordon, Lisa Harrow, and Barnaby Holm. He played Peter. So, this movie opens. Damien is now 32. So we're long past the 13 and a half he ended, almost 14, that he ended Damien Omen II with. We see a worker. They're sifting through the ruins of the Thorn Museum. And we see a worker find this knife, one of the knives, and he finds the rest of them. And we sort of watch how it gets to where it gets to. He finds the knives, he steals them. He gives them to a pawn shop. The pawn shop then realizes what they are. Someone buys it from the pawn shop who realizes what they are and looks them up, researches them, and then ends up putting them in a big fancy auction where another investigator type person, curator, finds out what they are as well, and then ends up selling them for a huge amount to a church body, a secret organization, a secret order. They end up getting into the hands of this secret order. Now, we are introduced to Sam Neill's Damien with him looking or screening a new commercial for Thorn Industries. He doesn't like it. It's not exciting enough. He tells them to make another one, but that's how we're introduced to his character. He meets up with his assistant, his personal secretary, which is Dean. Yeah. His assistant, and the coming fight that they have to engage in against the Nazarene. So we know instantly that Dean is his henchman, no doubt, because he talks openly about this stuff with him. He says that the coming fight is near because the Nazarene will be born soon. And he will be born in the UK according to prophecy, and stuff like that. So he is currently, he tells Dean that they have to get ready because he's going to be the ambassador soon. And he's like, how do you know that? And he's like, well, don't worry about it. You should know better than to ask that question. So we're then introduced to the current ambassador, who meets a hellhound, and that was like, what the fuck? Because this dog implants this in his mind. He goes back to his office, where he sets up this elaborate shotgun suicide. He positions it under his desk. He uses the typewriter ribbon to hook it to the door. He then calls a press conference, and I felt so sorry for his poor secretary, so he calls a press conference, and then the press all arrives, including Kate, and once they're all there, the secretary goes and knocks on the door, and he gets prepared, and he says, come in, and she opens the door, and boom, And they show it all, this big hole right here. And his back of his head goes everywhere. And you're like, okay. Well, that was rude. All those poor people. Like I said, I felt very sorry for his secretary. I guarantee you she will never hear the words come in and react the same way ever again. So he goes back to the office and sets up this thing, which was just amazing to watch. The president then, of course, makes Damien the UK ambassador, just like his father, actually, Robert. So he becomes the UK ambassador. At the same time, we're also seeing astronomers who are noticing that there is a Trinity star constellation that seems to be moving together into an alignment, and it's not going to be, too long. This stellar star conversion is about to happen, so it's very exciting for the astronomy community. We had then shown this secret order in this church, and he brings out the 7 knives for the 7 assassins. Each one, is given a knife, and they are to begin their mission to kill Damien. Now, Kate is introduced to Damien at an ambassadorial party. He's introduced by Dean and his wife, Barbara, who tells her, and he tells her to visit him and bring her son, Peter, to the park, which they do. So he immediately is taken with Peter, and Peter is immediately taken with him. Assassin number 1 takes his first shot when Damien agrees to appear on Kate. She's a TV personality. She has a talk show, news show, documentary news show. So he agrees to be interviewed on her show, at which this is the assassin number 1 decides to take the shot there, tries to get to Damien, but ends up falling from the walkway above the stage and swings back and forth, being wrapped in plastic in this burning fire. So he's burned to death on live television. So that's, 1 down, 6 to go, right? So he takes his shot, is burned on live TV. Dean discusses the attempt, where Damien informs him that it was an assassination attempt, and explains it to him. And he knows now that a team of assassins is after him. He knows that they've obviously found the knives from the ruins of the Thorn Museum. So they need to get ready and be on guard because of this group of assassins that are after him. So the order meets to find the exact birth date and location of the Nazarene. So we then get to see, sometimes I don't know what my notes are telling me because I write in a weird kind of shorthand, Damien has a creepy monologue with his Nazarene station. His Nazarene statue. Now, the way I have that written in my notes, damn creep monologues with his Nazarene statue. So sometimes when you see me pause, it's because I'm like going, what the fuck was I saying? What does that mean? Damien has a creepy monologue with his Nazarene statue. So maybe that will explain to you. Sometimes you're like, what is the dude? Is he like having a brain fart or something? No, I just sometimes can't read my own shorthand. So the convergence happens, and the Nazarene is born. Damien invites Kate for dinner. Meanwhile, Barbara, Dean's wife, gives birth to a baby boy. Damien follows assassin number 2 for a face-off, where 2 other assassins are waiting for him. But he tricks them with a hallucination. He tricks them into actually killing assassin number 2. So assassin number 3 and 4 brutally stabbed to death assassin number 2. It was all like a little mindfuck Damien did to them. Then, running from the storm, the dogs and him, they run down, and this is like way out in the middle of nowhere in some ruined church, right? So no one's ever going to find the bitches, at least not for a decade or two. And they go down into this hole. It's like a sewer system. They go down into this hole to escape him. And he closes the grate over the top of it. And it's just this little bitty space. So these 2 assassins are trapped in there, and there is no way they can move this gigantic wrought iron. I don't know. I mean, maybe you'd have the time to dig your way out through the dirt, unless it's like surrounded by masonry. I don't know, but they are definitely out of the picture. So, they're trapped in the old drain. So, 3 and 4 are down. That leaves 3 assassins left. Now, Damien starts coming up with the idea that he wants all male kids that were born between midnight and 6 a.m. on March the 24th to be killed. And I'll pause right there for a second to sort of analyze that, because a lot of people are like, oh, how awful. How awful. And it's not like I'm playing devil's advocate. And it's not like I'm giving any sympathy for the devil. I'm just saying that, oh, that's terrible. He's going to kill all of these male kids, babies, that were born on March 24th, like a week ago. He's going to kill them all? Have you ever seen the 10 Commandments? Have you ever heard the Metallica song, Creeping Death? You do know, if any Christians are watching this, you do know that your God, right? He murdered the firstborn children, babies, the firstborn kids of the Egyptians. You know, the finger of death that came out and went through the streets and killed the firstborn of Egypt. It's a whole lot of babies killed, including Pharaoh's son, who was only about, what was he, 6? Something like that. So let's not clutch our pearls, is what I'm saying. So he comes up with this disgusting plot to kill all the male kids born on March the 24th. And I'm not saying it's horrible, but the other was pretty horrible too. And speaking of which, Creeping Death is my favorite Metallica song from my favorite Metallica album, Ride the Lightning. And it's about the 10 Commandments. The scene in the 10 Commandments with Creeping Death, that's what that song is a musical version talking about that scene in the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston. So, if you've ever wondered what Creeping Death was about, I started to sing it, but I'm not going to. So, we then see a fox hunt with Peter, where assassin number 5 decides to take his shot. He uses this weird trick with the foxes. You know, he kills a fox, and he wants to separate Damien from everyone else. So, Damien, of course, is going to be out front, you know, hunting for the foxes. And his dogs are after a fox. So, he lets Damien go after that fox. Then he takes the dead one, and he rolls it on the ground and takes it off in another direction so that all the other fox hunters will go that way. so that he can get Damien alone, where he then traps Damien on a bridge. And assassin number 6 is at the other end of the bridge. And I'm like, you two just have no idea, do you? Because Damien was not even that scared. I mean, he was just like, really? Really? First of all, you're riding a horse. I'm the fucking Antichrist. You do know that it's going to take me about 2 seconds to get that horse to throw your ass off the bridge, which is exactly what he does. Then he looks back at assassin number 6 and was like, you're really stupid too. Because if you look around me, standing all around the Antichrist, there is about 25 foxhounds. What exactly do you think that I am fixing to do with the foxhounds? And then he says, and you can kind of see it on the priest's face. The priest was like, because Damien just goes, because now, man, all the dogs are frozen still, like staring at him, and then Damien is like, take him. Well, what you gonna do? Okay? You might can stomp one foxhound off your ass, but you ain't stomping 25 viciously. I mean, granted, foxhounds are not exactly big dogs, but, they're not chihuahuas either. And they do kill foxes. So, they do have teeth. So, you got 25 foxhounds under the power of the fucking Antichrist. Exactly how far do you think you're going to make it to your car? You're not. So, they, rip him to shreds. And he goes and, gets his handkerchief all bloody. Because, in fox hunting, the first fox hunt you're ever in, they're going to bloody your face, which is disgusting. But then again, so is fox hunting. So there you go. So I'm not like a member of Greenpeace, but still, it's just all gross. I'll just eat tuna fish and peanut butter. I don't have to do that kind of shit. So he gets back, and Peter comes up to him, and that's when you know something's really weird with them, right? Because Peter, he's like, did you get one? Yeah, there wasn't much left of it. Yeah, there wasn't much left of that priest. And so he wipes. It was a very creepy scene because he wipes the blood all over Peter's face. But then Peter grabs his hand and pulls it to his mouth and kisses it and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay. Well, I had a crush when I was 12 too. But it wasn't on a 32-year-old. But, so I don't know. That was a very creepy scene, in my opinion. But, so you can definitely tell that Peter is his. You know what I'm saying? So he puts the blood on Peter's face, who has fallen for him. Damien's people meet. This is where he's going to enact his plan. His creeping death. He meets all of these people, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them at this secret cove next to the beach. And he addresses them, and he tells them that this is what they have to do. They have to go and kill all of these babies. And what was interesting is they panned across at all the crowd, and when you're watching that, you're you really get a sense of how there is no such thing as a black hat or a white hat or the boogeyman, because you had nurses, you had Boy Scouts, you had old men, you had young men, you had punk rockers, you had uh, guys that looked like they were country music stars. I mean, it's like his people were from all walks of life. It wasn't like a Marilyn Manson concert, you know. And so, I mean, that's kind of like a neat statement for them to make, especially the kids. There were so many, like, 12, 13-year-olds. And so, you know, he met with them to give them, you know, go out and kill these babies. And, of course, Dean is orchestrating this, you know, because, you know, what you're going to do is you're going to find all the hospital records, right? And then you're going to call your people and go, this baby was born to these parents at this address, go kill them. So that's kind of what Dean is doing, coordinating the massacre. So he meets with them and tell them that they have to go and kill the Nazarene baby. We see many scenes of them afterwards, which was pretty wicked. We see scenes of this taking place. Like, we see two of the boys that looked about 10 and 12. We saw them at the gathering. And, like, one of them had a volleyball with him, kickball. And then we see those two kids strategically hit this woman pushing a baby pram down the road. And then the baby pram goes and gets smashed by a car. And you're like, and, you know, and then we see the two little Boy Scouts. We saw them show up at this woman's house and knock on the door. And she answered the door. And they were like, hi, ma'am. We're here to do our good deed for the day. And you're like, oh, my fucking God, what did they do? You know, that's one of the shortcomings of this movie, which we'll get to, because this is the lowest rated of the movies to me. And I'll tell you why. But, so we see them strategically killing these babies from that night. Damien watches a TV show, it's Kate's actually, where she's interviewing some people on the rash of babies dying over the last week. The last assassin, though, he finally, you know, which is the main priest, the leader of that order, he's the only one left. You see him talking to he shows up because he saw that report too. So he shows up to her house and wants to talk to her about the deaths. Being a reporter, she of course let him in and was like, "Oh, somebody wants to talk to me about my good reporting." So he goes in and he proceeds to, and he did it very well, and that is that. He was like, I know you might not be of my faith. You might not be a Christian or a Catholic or anything like that. But you can still see what I'm talking about, even if you're not. Because I know information that you don't. Because he tells her the theory. Damien is the Antichrist, blah, blah, blah. And she, of course, is like, sorry, I don't believe in that shit. And he's like, you don't have to. I know more information. Here. And then he shows her, he says, you don't have to believe the religious part of it. Just believe this. Here is a folder with all of these babies who's been killed. And he hands it to her. In other words, he's appealing to her secular scientist side. And he's like, all of these kids that were killed were born between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. on March the 24th. There's no way that can be a coincidence, which she has to accept. And so he's like, so what would be the reason for someone doing that? There's only one. They have to be looking for one specific child, so they're killing all of them that were born in that time frame. Now, she has to accept that because that's just true. You know, even if you don't believe in the religious part of it, any detective, a criminal psychologist would look and say, okay, yeah, that's fucked up. Something's going on. I might not believe your religious crap, But someone's looking for a specific child because all of these kids were born within a 6-hour period on the same day. So someone's got to be looking for that child. So that's how he sort of gets her suspicions to start. Because he knows she's not going to believe the shit about him being the Antichrist. So she does that. He does that. He gives her all of that information. Now, what they don't know is that Peter, just like Mark did, and number 2, Peter overhears this conversation between her and this priest. And he, of course, goes and tells Damien. Peter also overhears everything. And Peter gives the address of that last priest to Damien, where he gets Peter to start stalking him and keeping a logbook on him. So he's using Peter to watch this last assassin. Now, during his stalking, he sees that priest go to Barbara. Probably because the priest had all of the birth dates correct. So he had all of the birth records. So he didn't go to visit Barbara, which is what some people who watch this movie think. He didn't go and visit Barbara because he knew that Barbara was married to Dean, who is Damien's personal assistant. He didn't know that. He had the list, just like he had showed Kate. He had the birth records of all people born during that time. He was visiting them all. So he happens to go see Barbara. Peter happens to be stalking him and watching him, who reports it to Damien. So the priest talks to Barbara, who, when Dean gets home, she's got all of his papers out, and she's crying, and she's carrying on, and she accuses him of being part of this baby massacre, and she's just freaking out. Damien and Kate get together, and they have dinner. They end up going to bed together. She awakens and goes upstairs, can't find him, and goes upstairs and finds him naked in front of his Nazarene statue. And she goes up, and, the priest had told her about the birthmark. So she goes up, and she looks in his hair, and she finds it, right? And so she leaves. She knows it's the truth. So Damien then confronts Dean at the office about that priest visiting Barbara, and tells him that he has to kill his own son. Which, of course, he refuses. He's like, okay, I've had enough of this shit. Y'all are crazy. And she goes, he starts running home to get her and take off and leave. However, Hellhound shows up, takes control of her mind. She fucking kills her own baby with the hot steam iron. Right. She bashes the baby. And so Dean comes in, and she's still in the fugue state, and he goes into the kitchen and finds, they don't show the baby, but the look on his face was pretty much all you needed to see. So it's getting dawn. Vampires don't like that. But so when he sees the baby, she's right behind him, and she puts the point, because the iron is shaped like that, square and then up to a point. She puts that right through his fucking eye and shit and kills him dead. So he's dead. Her baby's dead. Then she kills Dean with it when he gets home. Now Kate and the priest speak again at her studio, and he tells her about Peter. Tells her, because she believes it, but she doesn't want any part of it, really. And, in my opinion, this was a good setup for a sequel, because, they screwed the night before. But he tells her all about Peter. That Peter hasn't been in school, that Peter is with him, that Peter is under his spell, that Peter belongs to him, and that if she wants her son back, she will help him, to get Damien. So she agrees, otherwise she'll lose her son to Damien. So Kate arrives and offers to take Damien and Peter to the baby, the Nazarene. And they agree. Even though Peter was like, no, Damien, don't believe her. It's a trick. It's a trap. So he was, even against his own mom, he was trying to protect Damien. So he goes anyway, though. They go there to this old cathedral, ruined cathedral, and the priest tries to ambush Damien, but he actually grabs Peter and picks him up, and so the priest actually ends up killing Peter, running him through with a knife. I suppose he's dead. I mean, they don't say it for sure, but you kind of assume that he's dead. And this upset, and he throws the priest across the room, and then he takes off looking for the Nazarene, doing his monologue, Nazarene stuff. And Kate takes the knife out of Peter and sneaks up behind him and runs him through with it. Then he walks up to a window, not believing that he's just been fucked, and falls down dead. And then you see someone, I suppose it was that priest, holding Peter, and Kate coming and getting Peter out of his arms, and the movie ends. And I gave this 8 out of 10 because I do love this movie, because I love the whole franchise. But this movie is the least favorite of most people, and it is the least favorite of mine, of them. But it's because it had some really good concepts, and it had some really good scenes, and Sam Neill was great. Peter was great. Kate was great. The whole storyline was great. But this movie played it very, very safe. Granted, that shotgun thing at the beginning, the ambassador, that was gross. That was good. And they showed it all. The assassins getting killed, the one that got burnt on live TV, that was a really good kill. But man, the rest of them were just really safe. They were not shown. They were kept off. They did show Dean after he had gotten that iron put through his face, and they did show that assassin getting stabbed by the other two. But most of the kills in this movie were very, very safe and were kept off screen. So this movie needed to be a lot more brutal. It's the Omen, for God's sakes. The kills in Damien, Omen II, like the elevator scene, it stayed in the same vein, but what I'm saying is that the final conflict really needed to go full force because times had changed. It was 76, 78, and now 81. Man, you had Friday the 13th. Okay? You had this huge rash. So this movie was released right in the middle of slasher fandango. And you played it way, way too safe. There were so many opportunities to have good kills in this movie. or I'm sorry, more blood, more gore, more violence, and it is the Omen for gosh sakes. Um, More jump scares. I mean, it was just the reason that it's got a lower score is because it was not 1978. It was not 1976. It was after the audience had been exposed to The Burning, and horror fans had been exposed to The Burning and Friday the 13th and Halloween 2. And so the audience just wasn't up for pussyfooting around in a rated R horror movie. Because in my opinion, if this movie rated today would be PG-13, it's nothing. I mean, yeah, he was naked in front of the Nazarene statue, but they didn't show anything, not even his butt. And that they could probably still get a PG-13 with that shotgun kill. That definitely with all the rest. But I think even the shotgun kill would pass. And there wasn't any sex, really. Nudity. There wasn't any to speak of. I think it showed her butt once. Didn't show him at all. Yeah. This would be a PG-13 movie. And that was its problem. Is that it's the Omen. The remake, a hell of a lot more scary. A hell of a lot more bloody. And Damien and the original are both more bloody. I mean, her going through that ambulance in the original, please. Baylock getting stabbed in the throat, they showed that in the original. The decapitation of the photographer, they showed that. So there was no reason for the final conflict to have been so tame. And that was its problem. Is that in their own ways, Omen 2 and the original Omen were a hell of a lot more brutal than the final conflict. And the final conflict had way too much in it that could have been exploited and made more violent and intense. Because they damn sure did it in the remake in 2006. I never had a jump scare in any of the Omen movies. I love them. But the new one, the remake, that sent me out my chair a couple times. They really turned that into a horror movie, of a different kind. But we'll talk about that next. And that was the final conflict. It's my least of the franchise, but I still like it because I like the trilogy. I like the whole story. And it's a good ending to the story, but they just really left it without using its potential as a good horror movie, scary horror movie. And I will see you in the next one. Love you, miss you. Bye-bye. Always remember, never forget, you're a very, very special person, and even if you are not the Antichrist. I'm not, I swear.